and welcome to 2024. Happy New Year. But also welcome to my best books of the year 2023. So here are 10 with a caveat of the best books that I read in 2023. Very, very exciting. I've just watched back my best books of the year 2023 that I make halfway through the year. I made it in July, and in it I rave and rave about how it's been one of the best reading years of the whole time I've been doing BookTube, and I would highly agree with that. I don't think my second half of the year has been as full of, as I kept saying in that video, banger after banger after banger as the first half of the year, but my god, I've read some absolute amazing books this year. So here we go with the 10 books. Now I've put them in, I've ranked them. And I preface this every time I make this video, I say this, but any other day it could come, they could come in a different order. So I've put them in sort of like 10 to number 1. But yeah, any other day they could be any order, but good God, 10 amazing books. So we'll start with the most recent one that I finished. And the reason I've put this in at number 10 is because I like to let books sit and percolate with me a little bit before I decide if they're one of the best books ever. But there's no way I can deny that this book hasn't absolutely gripped me and really affected my reading. And sort of like, I think I'll be thinking about this for a long, long time. And it's 3 Hours by Rosamund Lupton. This is, I read this after Christmas. I think I picked it up on the 27th, and oh my god, it was just the most gripping thing I've ever read. So it is a book told over 3 hours about a siege in a primary and a primary school, and I think that in a school, let's say, but there's young children there and older children there, and there's a siege and there's a gunman who's taken over. It opens with the headmaster being shot outside the library and pupils managing to get him into the library and care for him there. But yeah, so it is blow by blow of what is happening as it's happening, and we're following the perspective of children who are in various parts of this school hiding or trying to hide, teachers. We get an insight into the gunman. We get an insight into what the police are, what they're trying to do in this sort of thing. And I don't really want to give you like what happens in terms of why this gunman's doing it, and reasons behind it, and characteristics of the pupils and stuff in the school, because the way it unfolded was just wow. And there was parts of it where I was like, oh, I wonder if I've worked that out, and bits that I thought I'd worked out I hadn't. It was tense, and I will caveat this with if you work in a school or have children in a school, I might think twice about reading this, because I felt panicked reading it, and yeah, it was very, very real and very, very scary, but so compelling. And so I think the messages in here are really important, and yeah, there's a lot of talk about prevent, which is something that I've had to it's a training scheme. I've had to do it at the hospital that I work at and stuff in order to stop radicalisation and things like that. So there's bits in there about that, and yeah, it really, really hit hard. But I think this will stay with me for a really long time. And like, honestly, there was parts of it I was just like, and I'd let go, like, just, and it would take you away from it. The points were set so perfectly that something would happen, and then it would take you away from that event to another group of people where equally as dramatic stuff and gripping stuff is happening over there, and then bring you back to that. And just, yeah, it was expertly written, tension, and yeah, very well researched as well, I would say as well. But yeah, number 10 of the year. Next up is Idle Burning by Rin Yasami. This is translated from the Japanese by Asa Yoneda. And this is a book about fandom at its heart. It's only a little slip of a thing, and it's a book about a young woman and her obsession with a band, and her obsession in particular with one of the members of that band, who she calls her Oshi, which translates as her idol. So she's very into this band, and each of the band has different sort of like colours associated with them, and there's a lot of online presence with this band, and you have to sort of like vote for members of the band that you want to maybe take lead vocals or do a bit of choreography and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that. So she is obsessed with this band in particular, with her Oshi, her idol within the band, and she's got a blog that she runs, and people sort of come to her. She's become an expert really on her Oshi, and and what he does and how he acts and stuff like that. And she's even down to things that one of the other members of the band had stolen his phone off of him and had written a tweet in like 4 words, and she knew instantly that that wasn't him, that it was somebody else. She's like obsessed with him, and people come to her for her take on what's going on in the band and what's happening with her Oshi. And this is all sort of like whirring around, and you're getting to know the depths of her obsession and her fandom for this pop star. And then her Oshi hits a fan, and then people are then coming to her for her take, and she's got to sort of reevaluate everything that she thought she knew about him, because she never would have thought that that would have happened. It was really, really interesting. It was the second book this year I read on sort of fandoms and stuff, and it really got me thinking about my things that I'm interested in, and not as much so as this, although let me tell you, it don't take much to get me sort of obsessed of things, but I haven't really gone as far as to start a blog on Call the Midwife, let's say. But yeah, in particular, it got me thinking about how much I enjoy Call the Midwife, and the fact that I'm part of a Facebook group on Call the Midwife, and how people speak to each other on that Call the Midwife group, and potentially how people try and outdo each other a little bit on there. And it led to a lot of interesting conversations I had with people. I remember going for a walk with Jen whilst I was reading this, and we were talking about fandoms and stuff like that. Yeah, I found it really, really interesting, and I like, off the back of reading another book, which also appears on this list, which I will mention a bit later on, I was just amazed by the sort of the levels that people's obsessions are, and how deeply they feel things that happen to that group. I'm also on a Strictly Come Dancing forum, and the way people act, and this has happened, I've been thinking about this book a lot more recently, because Strictly Come Dancing's been on, and the way people react when their favourite professional dancers don't get a partner, a celebrity partner, and how people are saying, oh, I'm getting really upset, and like, I don't think I'm going to watch this year because my favourite celebrity dancer hasn't got my favourite professional dancer hasn't got a celebrity. And like, it really got me thinking about this again. So yeah, interesting take on fandom, and yeah, not very long at all, but very, very good, and yeah, liked it a lot. Next up is an audiobook that I listened to, and that was The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. I think this is the first book I've read by this author, and I will definitely be looking into more of her books in 2024. This really reminded me of a book also by an Irish author called Tender by Belinda McEwen, and I think the character in Tender was called James as well. But we're following two friends, Rachel and James, who have met and had this really intense sort of friendship connection whilst working at a bookshop, and they end up living together, and we're following their friendship and their sort of like living together, working together, their whole lives being each other, and also relationships that they are having. I don't want to go into too much about the relationships because they're a big part of the plot, but yeah, these relationships they're having, and how those relationships are impacting their friendship, and how maybe covering for your friend when they're having a relationship potentially with somebody they shouldn't be having a relationship, what that does to you, because you're not getting the rewards from this relationship, you're not having the sexual relationship, you're not having these sort of exciting feelings that these people are having, but what you're having to do is very much involved in this relationship. And yeah, it was a real sort of a page turner, but what's the equivalent of a page turner for something that you're listening to? Like, I didn't want to stop listening to it. I really enjoyed it, and I just felt like it had really done well in sort of like explaining this friendship and the things that you do for your friends, particularly when you're younger and you know that they're doing things that potentially they shouldn't be doing, and you sticking up for those people and doing things, and then how far will that go, you sticking up for these people. And yeah, it also sort of assesses a lot to do with distribution of wealth, set in the 2000s, and what it's like to be like a young person working part-time in a failing bookshop and potentially not getting all the hours you would like, and what you're going to give up in terms of you not being able to earn the money. So like, are you going to give up a night out with your mates, or are you not going to eat for 2 days, like that sort of thing as well. And then it has a lot to do with there's a bit in there about publishing, and like I said, there's a lot in there about a bookshop. It just ticked a lot of boxes for me, and I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I will definitely be looking into more of Caroline O'Donoghue's books in 2024. Next up was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This was, I think, maybe the first book that I read or one of the first books I read in 2023, and I really love it when one of the first books that you've read in the year then is still on your best books of the year, because it's really stayed with me. I mean, I read this like almost a year ago and I still think about it all the time. It's a book about gaming, which I really didn't expect to connect with, but it starts off in the early 80s where two young kids meet in a hospital waiting room, and they sort of talk a little bit about the games that they're playing and like a mini friendship, and then that sort of their paths divert and they come back together in a chance meeting 8 years ago when they bump into each other in a train station, and off the back of that the gaming thing starts talking again, and they reignite this friendship that they had, and they want to design games. Now I'm not a gamer. I was always into sort of like The Sims when I was younger, Age of Empires, that sort of thing. My husband David, he plays a few more games, but again, I wouldn't describe him as a gamer. He's sort of into FIFA, and maybe, like, I mean, he got a Spider-Man game that he got absolutely obsessed with for a few weeks and would play that, but then he'll go like a month or so without really picking anything up. So gaming wasn't really in my sphere. But I found this book so creative, and there was so much sort of application of creativity, and it got me really thinking about the stuff that goes into games and the background, as well as sort of like the coding and stuff, but how things look and what what sort of audience that's gonna appeal to, and all sorts of things like that. But then at the heart of this book is the relationships, and I remember when I was reading it, and also when I was wrapping it up, like, it really reminded me of like the first time I'd read John Green books, because I always think John Green is an author that really gets sort of like young people's relationships. And yeah, I feel like the friendships in here are really well imagined, and Gabrielle Zevin has really lived those friendships. It's also written in a really imaginative and creative way. There's chapters in here which are written sort of, there's one of the chapters that I remember vividly is called the non-player character chapter, and it's about non-player characters, which is becoming a bit more sort of, I think, in our vernacular, isn't it? People, I'm talking to David, he's doing his cross stitch, he doesn't care, but like those sort of like outsider looking in perspectives and stuff like that. But yeah, I found it really, really special. We read this for Patreon book club, and it ended up being our favourite book of the year. So yeah, very much enjoyed this a lot, and looking forward to reading more of Gabrielle Zevin. I have read, what also surprised me is that I'd read one of Gabrielle Zevin's books before. I'd read The Storied Life of AJ Fikri, which I found fine, but this is so different to that. I couldn't believe it was the same author, but yeah, amazing. Really, really thought this was special. Next up was The Shadow Cabinet. This was also an audiobook that I listened to. This is the second in the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series, and this is the series written by Juno Dawson. So Her Majesty's Royal Coven, book one, appeared in my best books of the year last year, and the sequel, the second in the series, because it's going to be a series, guys, I'm very, very excited, appeared this year. So yeah, a great thing. And I also love listening to the audiobooks of it. They're narrated by Nicola Coughlan from Derry Girls and Bridgerton and all sorts of other stuff. She does an amazing job of all the accents and everything else that's going on and just building the suspense. And there's a third book in the series which is out next year, and it's sort of like a prequel, and it's about Anne Boleyn and the beginnings of her coven that she started, and oh my God, I cannot wait to read that. But yeah, I can't really tell you all that much about the plot, because the plot follows on very closely from what's happened in the first book. And one thing I will say about Juno Dawson is that she does not care about killing off characters and doing things like big events in these books. So a lot of stuff that happened in the first book leads on to this book. But if I just give you a sort of potted plot of what the series is about. So it's about a group of 4 friends that are witches, and they live in Hebden Bridge and live ordinary lives. Some are married, some have children, but secretly they are witches, and they have different skills and magic sets and stuff within being witches, so they might have different things that they can do, and they're sort of like, they're recovering from a war that happened a good few years ago, and everything's still quite about that, and they've got this sort of like magical body, a bit like a witch in government, but yeah, just like lots of different aspects of I guess if you used to very much enjoy a series of books about a young boy wizard, this for me is that amazing feeling that I had when I read those books, but without the transphobia that author now has. So yeah, I really love this series, and the second one was just as good, and yeah, really followed on from that. So would highly recommend the whole series, but loved the second one so much. Sorry I'm so flaky with the plot, but there is so much. It's very plotty, and things happen very quickly, that I wouldn't want to spoil anything for you, because a small plot point, if you haven't read the first book, might be a big plot point in the first book. So there we go. Next up is The Memory of Animals by Claire Fuller. This was number 5 on my list, and yeah, I've got this out from the library, had a lovely time with it. I've enjoyed Claire Fuller books a lot. Unsettled Ground is another one of hers that's appeared on my best books of the year so far, but best books of my year a couple of years ago. But this one was set during a pandemic. She actually wrote this before the pandemic, which is insane, because the things that she's saying in the book, the things that you're reading, feel very reflective of the pandemic that a lot of us experienced. And yeah, we're following 3 perspectives. So we're following the perspective of a young woman who has volunteered for a vaccine trial, because there's a pandemic going on, and you're following her going along to receive her vaccine for the vaccine trial, and her turning up at this facility in London, and then waking up after potentially having had the vaccine and everything has gone to shit. So like looking out of the window to this sort of like apocalyptic London, and how things are very different. So that's one perspective. You're also following the perspective of someone within that unit that she has this sort of amazing pioneering technology whereby she can relax into a sort of dreamlike state and go back and relive memories that she's had. So she relives a lot of memories of like her with her mother and father, and meeting her partner, and all sorts of things like that. And then the third perspective is her writing letters, and that's where I guess the title, The Memory of Animals, comes into it. But yeah, really feeling, and like they're so cinematic. Like every time I was reading it, I never wanted it to end really, and it ends with sort of like not all that much resolution, and I was reading it thinking like it felt like a really well imagined and written TV drama with like really deep character studies and the plot. And when I was reading stuff about like looking out of her hospital room window down onto this London street, and this bus that had crashed, and all sorts of stuff that was going on around that, and like it just felt so real. So yeah, I mean, I know that pandemic novels aren't for everyone at the best of times, but yeah, this is following a pandemic. That might not be something that you're into, but I really thought it was something special and amazing. I hope they do something with it in terms of like television or film or something, because it really would be amazing. Next up is number 4, so the last book before we get into the top 3 of the year, and that's I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. So I mentioned earlier when I was talking about Idle Burning about having read 2 books about fandom this year, and this is the second one. So I actually read this first, and then off the back of that, quite a few people said to me, oh, if you've enjoyed that, you should read Idle Burning. And we also read this for Patreon Book Club, and there was a lot of feelings of it was really divisive in terms of like some people really loved it, some people fucking hated it, and some people like it was just, we had a great discussion about it. And it is a really divisive book because it's got a hugely unlikable narrator who we are following, and she is obsessed with, in the same way in I'm a Fan, with somebody that she's stalking on the internet, who she refers to, I think, as the woman who's sleeping with the man that I'm in love with. Nobody's got any names or anything like that, and it's all written so like some of these pages, it's got these sort of like, almost like comments under an Instagram photo, and sometimes it's like one line, or like a short paragraph, and it's written to feel a bit like social media and the feeling that you have when you're on social media. And yeah, she's stalking this person online and becoming increasingly obsessed with her, and doing sort of like out of the ordinary things, and also to bump into this person, like offering to dog sit for somebody so that she can be closer to where this woman that she's obsessed with, the woman who is sleeping with the man that she's obsessed with, lives, and visiting her online store, and then taking that a little bit further, and like just all these sorts of things, as well as this relationship that she's having with this man that she's obsessed with, who just treats her absolutely abysmally. And there's so much sort of grubby stuff going on, and the bits we're reading are like a stream of consciousness, and she's just saying all the things that you wouldn't ordinarily share with people, which are really awful thoughts about some people and things that she's had and things that she's done and relationships that she's had and stuff like that. But then occasionally she'll come out with something that you quite agree with and you'll be like, oh, bloody hell, I agree with that, but fucking hell, not all of that other awful stuff that she's been saying. So yeah, a book that I think everyone that when we were discussing it for book club agreed made them feel something, whether that be complete disgust, hatred, like really made them feel like, oh my god, ugh. And yeah, it was just very, very, very special. And yeah, a lot in there about what it's like looking in on people's lives and what those lives look like compared to what they actually are like, and yeah, and then the presentation of your life online compared to what's actually going on. But yeah, very, very, very layered, hugely layered, and very clever, but also just completely bonkers as well. So really, really, I just cannot believe this didn't get shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, let alone like win. Like this was, I didn't really love that. Well, I didn't only like 2 books on the whole long list, which is insane. But yeah, devastated that this didn't get further than the long list. So there we go. Right, we're into the top 3 now. Any guesses? Any guesses? And 2 of the books are by the same author. We'll start with that author. So number 3 is Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang. I read this sort of halfway through the year. I still think about it now. I've just bought it for my sister for Christmas. I really, really think it's something clever and again, layered. I'm very into sort of layered stuff, so that on the surface you're reading a book about something and then when you look deeper there's stuff going on. I'll give you a sort of potted plot for this, but yeah, you're following a woman, June Hayward, who has a sort of loose friendship or maybe sort of like acquaintance with a young Chinese American woman called Athena Liu, who is a very accomplished author, has sort of success levels that are compared to that of Sally Rooney, and she writes these sort of like amazing books. And one night Athena, and I should also mention that June is an author but has had limited success, some sort of like romance novels and stuff. And one night June and Athena are together and Athena dies in a terrible accident. Now while they're together at Athena's house, she shows June a new novel that she's been writing, and when she writes these novels she doesn't tell anyone what she's writing about or anything like that until it's finished, and then she takes the whole manuscript and sends it off. So June is now in this house with a dead Athena, and this novel that she's written and all this sort of like research and stuff, and nobody knows about this novel. So she takes the novel and she passes it off as her own, which is hugely problematic in terms of plagiarism and things like that. But then we also get into how the fact that Athena is a Chinese American woman and June is a white woman. When she publishes this book, she instead of publishing it under June Hayward, the author name of June Hayward, she goes for her full name, which is Juniper, and takes her middle name, which is Song, and publishes the book under the name Juniper Song, which has sort of like potentially like Asian connotations, and then puts this book out into the world. So not only are we looking at sort of plagiarism, we're now looking at cultural appropriation and things like that. It's tense. It's really tense, and really there's parts in this as well that get a bit spooky as well. Like there was a few spooky bits where I was like, oh my god, what's going to happen here? I must warn my sister about those spooky bits because she's a bit frightened. But yeah, and there's just some great dialogue in here, as well as this sort of really promising plot that happens the whole way through. I really, really loved it, and I thought it was really, really great. And yeah, tense. It felt tense. So yes, hopefully, I mean, I imagine this was sort of like the book of the year, I guess, like whether or not I saw a lot of people that didn't really love this book, but like I remember going to an independent bookshop to buy this book. David and I filmed a video in there, and while I was in there, 2 people came. I'd taken the last copy and 2 people came in and asked for that copy whilst I was literally walking around holding it, and I was thinking, please don't take this away from me. I really want it. So yeah, a great book. And then, as I said, there's in the top 3 there's 2 books by one author, and that is again Rebecca F. Kuang. So I read early on in the year the book Babel. This is another one that I've just bought for Christmas. I've just bought this for my dad for Christmas. And when I think about this book, the main thing I think about when I think about it is I wish I was reading this again for the first time, which is a thought I don't often have about books, but I just really immersed myself in this world, and it just felt very, very all-encompassing, and yeah, I think about it a lot. My best friend Emma's reading this at the moment as well, and I keep checking in with her like, and what did you think of this bit? And what did you think of this bit? So yeah, I'm very, very into it. I will tell you all about it. So we're following, so it's set in Oxford, and I think it's like the 1600s. Maybe not, but it's set in Oxford, and Oxford is sort of like the epicenter of all things sort of power and money and travel, and has this sort of like bustling like financial and knowledgeable moment it's having. And we're focusing on a particular college within Oxford called Babel, which is a translation college, and within that there's works going on that sort of involve a magic system. I will try to explain the magic system best I can, but I'm not very good at explaining magic systems. But it works with translation, and it works with maybe a particular word and then 2 different translations of that word in different languages. The example that I used in the last video, which I will use now as well, is the word for maybe steady, and those words coming together, and then the power of those words being imbued in this sort of like silver bar, and then the word for steady being in this silver bar, and then putting it into a like a horse and carriage, and that means that it runs really steadily, and like it's smooth and lovely. So yeah, so that's, but there's all sorts of like different levels of it, and there's sort of like weapons, obviously, because anytime anyone's got any power or knowledge, then it gets used on weapons, and food stuff and lifestyle stuff, and something happens where these silver bars aren't being made anymore. There's a lot in there about revolution and colonialism and all sorts of stuff going on. And these silver bars aren't getting made anymore, and the first thing that sort of goes is the sort of the comforts that the upper classes have. So like these bars that are making their carriages run really steadily, they run out of charge and they can't make any new ones, so people are now having to go through the uncomfortableness of having an uncomfortable journey. And when these sort of like minor shifts start happening, the behaviours and the reactions of other people. But yeah, Robin Swift, the main character that we're following in this, I really, really loved hearing about him and his friendship groups. It feels like a lot like a campus novel, as well as being this sort of like amazing feat of writing that involves magic systems and real good observations on colonialism and knowledge and stuff like that. But it also feels like this group of mates who are at university together studying for the same sort of thing, and some of them excelling in that and some of them struggling and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a real special thing. And like I said, I don't feel like this, I very rarely feel that feeling of I wish I could read this again for the first time, but that is how I feel about it. And I'm actually going to listen to the audiobook of it. I've got a reservation on it on Libby at the moment. I've got 6 weeks till it comes in, so I've got a while to wait for it, but I think revisiting it is going to be a real treat for me. So there we go, number 2, Babel by R.F. Kuang. And then the last book is actually a series of books, so I've been a bit cheeky here, but it is the Cazalet Chronicles by Elizabeth Jane Howard. I've put these in the order that they come out, so The Light Years, Marking Time, Confusion, Casting Off, and All Change. And the series that I've got, David's mum bought them for me. And for some reason, you need to have them like, they go in this beautiful order, and the spines create this lovely little scene of a train travelling through the country. But yeah, this was a lovely treat to have a whole series of books to get myself involved in, and a whole family of characters to really get to know, and in some cases really become quite fond of. Like, there was a lot of characters in this story. So you're following the Cazalet family. At the top of this family are the mother and father, who you don't really hear all that much from. They're the seniors of the family, the older, the Kitty and the Brig, and then their children. They've got 3 sons and 1 daughter, and within that family there's grandchildren of theirs, and as we get further on in the story, great-grandchildren of theirs. And it spans quite a long amount of time. So it starts in 1937 and actually ends in 1958, and just being able to spend that amount of time with like a group of characters, some of whom I really liked and really loved hearing about their lives and was concerned about them when they had concerns, and some characters who I really loved to hate and was like, oh my god, piss off, and hearing about their lives as well. Like, I loved the feeling of being with these characters for so long. It was a real lovely treat. And what was all topped off so nicely was that I read this one, the last one, in December, and this is set mainly over a Christmas in the house, which it all kicks off in the light years. This is in the first one where they all go to stay at home place for Christmas, for the summer, and then it all ends like over 20 years later, where they're all spending their last Christmas there. And yeah, like I said, I loved the characters, I loved the stuff. It felt so modern for something that was set so long ago, and there's so many sort of like modern themes and things that I couldn't believe that it had been written the time that it had been written. So this one had originally been published, in 1990. So it's not sort of like really historical, but it had been written in 1990 and written about that period of time. And then the 4 books, it originally came out as a foursome and then all changed. The last one was written by Elizabeth Jane Howard just before she died. And that was written in 2013. So yeah, this sort of come as a thing. But every single book started with a family tree, which is something that I absolutely love about a book. So this is the one in the first one, so don't worry, you're not getting any spoilers. But then when I'd go on to the next one, I'd be so excited to look at that family tree and see what had changed from the first family tree. But yeah, an absolute delight, like a delight and a treat to have all of these books to devour. I would definitely be reading more Elizabeth Jane Howard. I don't see me ever enjoying another book by her as much as I've enjoyed this series, but yeah, 5 books. 5 books is my favourite book of the year. I mean, does that count? But yeah, all of them. I will say, I loved all of them, but my favourites were probably All Change and Confusion, the 5th and the 3rd. But yeah, all of them were just fantastic. Loved them. So there we go. My bestest books of 2023. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Would any of these books have appeared on your best books of the year, do you think? Or let me know below what your best books of the year have been. I hope you've had a lovely 2023. We're about to enter, well, we're in 2024. By the time you're watching this, Happy New Year. And yeah, I'll see you all again soon for another BookTube video. Goodbye!